Well, good afternoon. Thanks for coming back from lunch for this session on OpenStack. It's hard for me to see you guys. Those lights are really bright, but I'll try to do my best. So thanks a lot for coming. We're really excited to be here at the XCommerce Innovate Conference. We've been working with a lot of eBay properties for a long time at RackSpace. So I'm Otis Wittenberg. I'm with RackSpace, and I'm going to talk a little bit about RackSpace, but mainly about OpenStack, but they're pretty closely linked, so I have to mention both. So we're really excited to be here. We've been, as I mentioned, working with eBay Inc. and a number of their properties for a long time, and we have a really close partnership, and I'm very excited about that. Importantly, OpenStack is a huge initiative. How many of you guys are familiar with OpenStack? Okay, a few folks. How many people have downloaded the code base and actually worked with it? A couple? Okay, good. So I have a lot of opportunity to convert folks then. So my mission will be complete if a few of you guys after this session go and download the code and start working with it. But OpenStack is an open cloud initiative. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about what it is, how it got started and what momentum it has, who's using it and why, talk about what it means to you, and I'm going to talk a little bit about just the open source nature of the project in general. I'm not a developer, so Neil Sample, I don't know if he's in here or not. He started off his session yesterday. He said, I'm Neil Sample, I'm a developer. I'm Otis Wittenberg, and I'm not a developer. Apologize for that. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn, and I have never played a developer on TV either. So I have, however, brought some with me. So Andy Smith, who we call Termy, is sitting in the front row on one of the beanbags, and when we're done, I'll try to go through this pretty quickly, and we can ask some more developer-esque type questions, and he'll be able to answer those. So real quick commercial on RackSpace. I've got to do this because they pay my salary and feed my kids, and they bought my breakfast this morning. RackSpace, as many of you hopefully know, is a world leader in hosting. We're about 12 years old, about 3,500 employees, about 140,000 customers worldwide. We consider ourselves the second largest infrastructure as a service cloud provider behind Amazon. Company is growing very rapidly. It's a great place to work, wonderful culture. We anchor everything we do in service, so it really is a service-oriented mentality. And that's why we've been working with eBay Inc. properties for so long. So if you haven't checked out RackSpace, please do. RackSpace and OpenStack, like I said, are really closely linked in a couple different ways, and I'll go through that. We're really betting our company on OpenStack and on the OpenStack movement. So we certainly want to see it be successful. This is just another little thing we did for this conference. We have a really strong partner program. I encourage you guys, depending on if you're from a merchant or from a developer, to check this out. We'll have the web page later on in the presentation, but it's somewhere you can go and you can understand what we do with Magento, what we do with eBay Inc., et cetera. So we are actually, not related to what I'm talking about today, but RackSpace itself hosts probably more Magento community and enterprise software editions than anybody else. We also host the Magento Go SaaS platform, so we're really tightly ingrained in this community that's here today. So what is OpenStack? OpenStack really is an open source cloud platform. It looks like a couple of you guys have heard about that. It was formed about 18 months ago when NASA and RackSpace came together, and they basically joined their code bases along with about 20, they brought the code to the table. About 25 other companies were also involved. That community has grown a lot since then, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But OpenStack really is about creating an open global cloud platform, not proprietary, no lock-in, that's interoperable and always on. That's what OpenStack is. What it consists of today, and again, we can talk later about more technical questions, and Termy will be able to help answer those. But what it consists of today is really compute, storage, an image service, and in our latest release, we had two other functions that were included, which was the dashboard and the identity. This is the release cycle. So OpenStack itself is on a release cycle of every 6 months. So as you can see, we just released Diablo, which was in September, and we are considering Diablo the first production-ready release. We have customers using OpenStack in a production environment today, many running thousands of nodes on it. Diablo, again, over the past 6 months, the community has developed Diablo with the work of many companies, many individual developers, over 70 new features, and there's a lot of focus on networking and scale. The two big incubated projects in Diablo were the dashboard and identity. Before the dashboard, you had to work with OpenStack just via APIs. Now we're making that a little bit more user-friendly. Obviously, the APIs are still a key point. A lot of momentum around OpenStack. When we first started the project, there was about 70 participants to the code base, folks that were actively putting code into the repository. That's changed a lot. Now there's over 1,700. Also, you can see the slope of downloads increasing dramatically as the product itself has moved to a more production-ready platform. And this is only part of the story. This is what's been downloaded at openstack.org, which we're familiar with as RackSpace. But there's also other places where you can get the code base. And so this is really only part of the story. It is really interesting. Almost every day, a company will email us via our form, and they'll ask us about support or training or some other attribute of OpenStack, and they'll say things like, hey, I downloaded the code 4 months ago. I've been running it in a test and dev environment. A company we didn't even know was using the code. Many companies across many sort of industries. Could be financial services, could be government, and it really is international in scope. I mentioned a minute ago we have about 1,700 participants, about 116. This is actually an old number. It's about 130 companies participating actively. This is the logo slide. So a lot of big companies that you recognize. RackSpace is a big part of this. Dell, HP, a lot of small startups. There are over half a dozen companies that are funded just building businesses on top of OpenStack. And they're funded by real VC firms, like folks like Kleiner Perkins and like are putting money into companies to build on top of this platform. It really is a platform. Hopefully some of the companies you guys work with are on this screen. There's a number of folks using OpenStack today in production as well, and also in test and dev. One of the companies, Mercado Libre, eBay Inc. actually used to own a portion of that, still does, I think, have a minority stake. They're running over 6,000 nodes on OpenStack today. They are a leading South American and Mexican e-commerce company, one of the largest e-commerce sites in the world, and they're running this in production today. Their use case from an IT perspective is they used to be the bottleneck. When their businesses wanted new apps developed, they were the bottleneck before OpenStack. Now they have the flexibility and the agility to deliver applications much more rapidly for their internal folks, and they're very excited about it. Sony PlayStation is another big customer that's deploying on OpenStack. A number of others, and there's also a ton of them we can't really talk about because they're under NDA. User groups on OpenStack are popping up everywhere, and that really is a sign of how vibrant the community is, and that really is the power of OpenStack. The power of OpenStack as an open cloud platform is really about the communities and the developers that code the project and contribute that back to the project. That's happening everywhere. This is just a small sampling. These are the ones that we've been directly involved in. It's always good to see pictures. Rooms full of people, hackathons, all kinds of great activity going on around the community. If you want to learn more about OpenStack, this is a great place. A lot of resources here, openstack.org. Again, the page views and the downloads, it's just picking up a lot of momentum. There's a lot of activity around the community. Just last week in Boston, we had our second design summit. It was a huge success. We had 600 attendees, 150 companies. If you remember, I talked about when this started 18 months ago, it was 25 companies, and really only a couple of those 25, really doing the work. A lot of it was branding, and it was sort of getting involved in the movement. And now there's over 150 companies participating in this, and they were there from 6 continents. So the idea is the power of the community, which is the developer community, building the code, is growing, and it's growing rapidly. There's a lot of companies, many on those slides before, NTT, Sony, Fidelity, that are dedicating developers to work on the project. So they're saying, listen, you as a full-time developer working for NTT, your job for the next 6 months is going to be code, and it's all going to be deployed back into the OpenStack community. So there's a lot of momentum there, and that really matters. Just last week, this is a sampling of companies that introduced their involvement in the community. And these guys are doing real things. HP, big company, in a little bit of disarray right now, but they are building their entire public cloud, multi-tenant cloud on OpenStack, and that's what they announced last week. A number of other folks coming to the table. We're really excited. You may have seen this yesterday, but XCommerce also joined the community, so yay. There's a few XCommerce folks in here. If you heard Neil Sample talk, this is a key component of the fabric. So the OpenStack platform is a key piece of the fabric, and it's really similar to the fabric in that the idea that it is global, can be run in your own data center, can be run in a hosting data center like ours, can be run in a colo facility. It's always on, interoperable. That's the vision, much like the vision for the fabric. So there's a lot of similarities there. So why OpenStack? Why does it matter? Why are we doing OpenStack? Why did RackSpace, bet the company on OpenStack? Well, it's really a couple of reasons. It's more than just an open source project, for just doing an open source project. It really is a platform. If you think about successes in open source, there's a whole number of them. Many of you are probably more familiar with them than I am. Here's a couple, and they really matter because they enable sort of massive innovation. They sort of unleash innovation. We believe in the OpenStack group and at RackSpace that the cloud is just that. I mean, it's a disruptive platform change, and big things are going to happen, even bigger than the web. But why OpenStack? When the web is, by its nature open, and it's available, and it's, free. The cloud is not. So far the cloud has been characterized by really proprietary systems, which are great. Amazon's got a great cloud. Our current multi-tenant cloud is also a great cloud. It's the number 2 IaaS in the world. VMware has done a great job building private clouds, but they're all proprietary. So we believe, as a company that's been leveraging Linux for a long time, that open standards win and they matter, especially in the cloud world. And so really, until today, until OpenStack came to fruition, the cloud was closed and proprietary. We want to change that. And it really is about a global standard, a global sort of platform that can be leveraged, like as I mentioned earlier, in your data center, outside of your data center, with hosting providers like ourselves. I mentioned this already. We bet our company on OpenStack. One of the digs on OpenStack has been that RackSpace has been too involved. And we did. We started it. We contributed our code, working with NASA, working with other firms like Citrix and Canonical, et cetera. But we've been very involved, and someone has to do that. Someone has to shepherd the community until it gets its legs. And that's happening. As some of the stats I showed a moment ago prove that. The community actually has its legs, and it's innovating very, very rapidly, much faster than we actually thought it would in the beginning. So one of the digs on OpenStack is that RackSpace has been too close and been too controlling. So what we've decided to do, and this has really been the plan from the very beginning, is that we've decided to move it into a foundation. We knew, as RackSpace, if we were too close to the project, we still want to be very involved, that there would be the perception that we were controlling sort of the direction of the code base. That's really not the case. So moving it to a foundation, we can talk more about that, but it is a big move. It is a big move for us. I was having some lunch with some executives from eBay, and this is actually one of their concerns, and it's one of ours as well. It's something we have to be very careful of, but it's sort of forking in the code. So the big theme from last week at the Design Summit was, it was a little bit comical, but the kind of the quote of the week was, "Don't fork it up." And I forget who came up with that, but everybody got a big chuckle. But the idea is this, is that we want to foster a global open cloud platform, compute, storage, network, et cetera, as the shared engine. And then we want companies to innovate on top of that. So the whole notion is we want to build one engine and have everybody build their cars on top of that. Whether you want a Ferrari or a Fiat or a Hugo, whatever you want, you build it on top of the engine. But we own, as a community, we keep the shared engine as the core of our being. So a great example of this is Quantum. Quantum's a networking project. And Quantum, as led by the community, really brought competitive interests together that you wouldn't normally expect to be together. So it involved a lot of individual developers from around the world. It involved Cisco. It involved Nicira, 2 leading networking companies. Nicira, obviously, a leader in next-generation networking. But it's a great example of how open standards and an open community and an open platform can bring those folks together to build an engine that benefits all of us. And much like Neil talked about yesterday, it really is, this is similar to the Fabric in that it's also, it also contains sort of the network effect. The more developers are on the community, the more companies there are building these projects, the better off everybody is. We build a better shared engine. Again, we want to build a better cloud, and this is really why. We believe that an open cloud is really the legacy of the web. So the web is very interesting, and it's open. Today, there are no clouds that are open. Building an open cloud matters. So that's really all I have. I wanted to leave some time for Q&A. You guys are all developers. I'm not. This is where I want to bring Andy up to talk about any questions you might have around OpenStack, where the project is in its development, and any technical questions you have about the code base. This is Andy's email. He's a developer guy. I'm not the developer guy. I'm up here for my good looks. And then cloud builders at RackSpace, that will get to me. Anybody have questions? Oh, wait, hang on. There's a microphone. They really want you to use the microphone. You can come up here. This is on. Right here. Here's the first one. Then there's one back there in the back.
I came into this discussion because I had actually come onto the website before, but don't know a lot about it. Can you guys give us some ideas, imagination-wise, where this can go? What does that even mean to have like a cloud platform, like in terms of just provisioning servers or shared storage, or what do you guys? Where does the imagination? Can you open up our minds to this?
Yeah, that's a good question, and let me take a shot at that and I'll let you jump in. So really, we're building our multi-tenant cloud on OpenStack. So when I say RackSpace is betting on this technology or this platform, that's what we're doing. A lot of the interest in OpenStack today is from other service providers because they need to run at scale. So the folks that are really interested in a platform like this, they'd have to build it themselves, or you really can't afford the licensing from the proprietary groups if it's even available to you. So when I say about a ubiquitous sort of cloud, it is the same, the idea is the same version of the cloud operating system running in various places all over the world. So it could be in our data center, it could be in your data center, it could be in another third party. RackSpace as a company, we're okay with this. We're okay with sort of handing over the crown jewels, the code base, in essence, because we believe that we'll win on service. We're a services-oriented company. So we're here to provide service, whether it's on-premise, off-premise, et cetera. So that's really what I mean when I say a sort of a global, open standards-based platform. Much for the reason that XCommerce is building out their fabric on OpenStack. Number one, it's open source, so there's no licensing fees. Number two, they can run it in their own data centers. They can burst to a company like RackSpace, or if they don't like us, they can burst to someone else. Internap, DreamHost, HP's building a multi-tenant cloud, Dell's building a multi-tenant cloud, and there'll be more. So that it provides sort of that flexibility with no vendor lock-in.
A couple of the things I would probably add are that the idea of sort of a hybrid private and public cloud, those sort of things can only really be enabled if you're all speaking kind of the same language, which we're hoping OpenStack will become. Other than that, just simply the commoditization of that to basically bring it, thinking of it as sort of the Linux of clouds, right? The idea that we want to commoditize these things that all of us should have, that we can move forward with that and produce more features and greater ideas than any single company is ever going to have on their own.
Do you have a question back there? Okay. Any other questions? Ask Jeremy some really hard questions. All right, here's a hard question, I can tell.
What kind of platforms do you guys work with? Like, I know I heard it runs on Ubuntu, but do you guys support running Windows and stuff under it too?
Yeah, we actually support pretty much everything at this point. It runs on Ubuntu and Linux and things like that, but we can also support. We have a pretty solid Windows support coming through, HyperV, things like that. I don't work on that personally, but we have kind of a Windows team sort of set aside who's trying to make that all happen. And yeah, so we do most of our development on Ubuntu. It's sort of our blessed operating system, but some of the other large companies, Citrix, I think, is one of them, is a Red Hat company largely, so they make sure that everything runs on Red Hat and package it for that as well.
Yeah, I would say one of the attractive parts of OpenStack is that it's really built to be an agnostic orchestration layer. So from a hypervisor standpoint, as Jeremy mentioned, it runs on HyperV, ESX, Zen Server, KVM. Most of the initial deployments are on KVM. But the idea of the open platform really is to be agnostic, to prevent lock-in of really any type. And I don't know if you saw, it was kind of a quick flash on the logo eye candy sheet. I mean, Microsoft was on there for that reason. They've ensured that HyperV works with OpenStack. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, so we're a current RackSpace Cloud Files and Cloud Servers customer. We've been trying to get some information from you related to kind of the roadmap of the rollout and adoption of OpenStack so that we can actually start replicating and moving between our instances that are on RackSpace for files and servers, particularly for Windows. And I know that there's some stuff in development, but if you could kind of maybe tell us where you're going, when we might be able to see some of those new features or support come out.
Well, thanks for being a customer, first of all. We appreciate it. So first of all, you're using OpenStack today then if you're using Cloud Files at RackSpace. That is on the Swift platform, which is the OpenStack storage cloud-based or file-based storage. As far as the timeline for us to move our multi-tenant cloud to OpenStack, that's Q1 of next year. We're currently in an alpha, and we could probably get you involved in that if you wanted to be involved in that. But we're migrating to that very quickly. I mean, again, we are committed, to running all of our clouds on OpenStack, whether that be private clouds for enterprise customers or our multi-tenant cloud. So we can talk more about that offline.
We just
Yes, sir.
just have a question on Twitter. The question is, there's been a lot of talk about security in the cloud. What is OpenStack's approach to that?
There's quite a few different sort of security special interest groups that are currently working on implementing their various technologies on top of stuff. We've taken a a fairly security conscious view on things, but there's definitely steps we'd like to move forward. It's a pretty big question, though. I mean, security means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. VMs are relatively considered rather secure at this point. LXC, for example, would be considered less secure. But yeah, we're attacking it on kind of all fronts.
Here's one up here in the front row. You're getting your exercise in.
I represent SAP Labs here in Palo Alto, and we are in the process of building in-memory computing cloud. And one of the discussion is coming about is the infrastructure like OpenStack as a cloud platform itself. Based on your experience, third party trying to take OpenStack as a code base and install on top of their infrastructure, network infrastructure, what is your experience? What the timeline, based on your experience, you have seen people doing it, and what are certain gotchas you can see?
Well, it's definitely still at the point where you want a sysadmin, basically, on your company. It's not quite turnkey. That said, though, there are quite a few people who've installed it without us ever even talking to them or knowing them or asking us questions, who have had very successful. Quite a few different universities and things like this have set up labs that are running OpenStack to support their computing needs. It's definitely, there's good instructions on the internet. There's the biggest gotchas, as with just about anything that's actually doing with large clusters of computers, are basically networking. So you have to probably have somebody who knows how your network is configured, and that's probably the biggest issue you'll have. It just means that you have somebody whose arm you have to twist to make sure that things are plugged in the right ports. It handles just about any configuration. However, you need to know what your configuration is.
So does your OpenStack code base today directly understands all the configurable items on your switches and your networking gear? And does it get directly configured? I mean, you create a VIP and a private network. Does it understand those things and capable of provisioning those things? Or
at this point, so the Quantum project actually that he mentioned before is specifically a project meant to address a lot of those. There's 3 standard networking layouts that we use in OpenStack, either VLAN-based flat network or flat network with DHCP. Depending on how you set things up, those will affect you. The most common deployments we've seen usually end up with about 3 different VLANs, and then doing flat network or flat network DHCP over one of those interfaces, and then having an admin and a management network separate.
How do updates work, and do they affect availability of the system?
At this point, the updates are. It hasn't been too terrible, but it's definitely a migration thing that we're working on making much smoother. We obviously have the issue constantly on our own. Any deployments we've done, we have to go update them. It hasn't been bad so far, just because we haven't had any really significant changes, and we hope to keep it that way. We hope to not do things like change what kind of database you're using or something like this, which would kill us. So we don't want to do that. So mostly it's basically migrate hosts off of a machine, update the machine, migrate hosts back onto the machine. Of course, in practice, it's a little bit more complex than that, but that's why we still employ people.
The question right here.
Up front.
Okay, so how does a company get involved? Like there's a list of companies, like 125 companies on the website. And how does a company get involved, and what does that entail? And does it entail contributing to the code base or doing something, or what is it?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a few ways. One is obviously contributing to the code base and agreeing to let us put your logo on a slide somewhere. I think as far as I've known, it's just been ad hoc. I mean, you just simply say you want to be involved.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's some legal language because even these large companies that have agreed to be part of the project are donating their code back. I mean, you do that, there's sort of legal implications about ownership and IP. So depending how large your company is, I mean, as for an individual, it's very different. You just start contributing. For a company,
you do
that
sign
can
a
be
CLA at some point.
Yeah. It's relatively straightforward. Any other questions? Any hard questions? Anybody still awake out there? You have a question?
No, I don't have a question. I'm Nikki. I'm with RackSpace Cloud Builders as well. At our booth, we have the ability to give you a demo if you want to see the dashboard for OpenStack. I think it does a really good job in demonstrating a lot of the features and functionality in a much sort of easier and concise way. So if you guys are interested, stop by our booth. We've got folks at our booth who are engineers. We've got folks from our channel program. And, of course, we have some Cloud Builders folks as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Last call. Well, good. Well, thanks for your time. It's always tough going right after lunch, but thanks a ton. We're really glad to be part of the XCommerce future, and we appreciate your time and attention.